got this, or do you want me to talk? Is this way better?
Way better.
It's way, okay. Rats. Well, I'm Scott Carney. You probably don't recognize me with my shirt on. And that will be for the after party. So, you know, just a little bit about me. I'm an investigative journalist, an anthropologist. I write for various magazines and things. I wrote a few books. But the journey that brought me here and to doing the sort of the crazy things that I get up to. Actually, I'm going to show you this video first because I don't know where to put this in the thing, so I'm just going to start it with this. And then I traveled to Poland to expose a charlatan, a prophet who claimed he could give ordinary people superpowers. He said he could control his body temperature at will, hijack his immune system, and conquer the world's tallest mountains with no cold weather gear. I built my career as an investigative journalist debunking people like him. But to prove he was a liar or a madman, I had to try his method. I'm not an athlete, I'm not exceptional, but I found a power that I never knew humans had. I hiked to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro without a shirt. I sat on the snowy bank of a river until the ice melted around me. I trained with top athletes. I crossed the finish line of the world's most notorious cold weather obstacle course race, wearing nothing but shorts and a smile. I could do 80 push-ups on a single breath, and I lost 7 pounds of fat in 7 days. If I can do it, anyone can. I look so cool in that. Really helps to have a great video editor, I guess. So, you know, a little bit how I got to doing all this sort of crazy stuff. It didn't just go because I was like, let me go take off my shirt and roll in the snow. There's actually a sort of a method to this madness. And it started back in 2006 when I was just about to drop out of a PhD program in anthropology from the University of Wisconsin. I was fed up with academia for various reasons that, you know, people get fed up with academia. And I had decided to lead broad programs for American college students throughout India. My research area had always been India. At that point, I had lived in India for 3 years, off and on, speaking Hindi. You know, had done a whole bunch of research that has nothing to do with what I'm doing now. But I loved India at that time. And one of my first experiences with India back in 1998 was as a college student. And I wanted to sort of continue that tradition and teach other people about that country. And so this was in 2006. And I had, I think, 12 students between the ages of 17 and 24 underneath me. And we went to all the holy sites across the north, starting in Delhi, going to Varanasi, which is the holy city of the dead in India, and then on to Bodh Gaya, which is where the Buddha attained enlightenment about 2,800 years ago. And the highlight of this program was going to be the 7-day silent meditation retreat in the Tibetan tradition, where we were going to meditate on bliss and enlightenment, the nature of nirvana, and things that I'd been studying for a long time in the Tibetan tradition, and it was great. And so for this setting, I was a student along with my other students, and it was going to be totally silent, and we had a nun, a Buddhist nun, teaching us the Lam Rim, the sort of introductory steps to enlightenment. And on the program, besides me was this one student. Her name was Emily O'Connor, and she was the best, the brightest, the most driven of all of us, and she would sit in front of me in this meditation retreat, and just have the perfect posture. She'd been studying yoga for a long time. She was really 100% in this. And I never really talked to her during this because of the rules of the retreat. And when it ended, after 7 days of meditating on enlightenment, bliss, or the nature of our own mortality and how important it is to realize that this is sort of a temporary time we're here on Earth, we start talking again, and she still sort of remains quiet. She's like processing what's been going on. And we're getting ready to pack up, and we're going to go meet the Dalai Lama, who's the head of of Tibetan Buddhism in Dharamsala in about a week. So it takes a little while to get up there. And my student sort of spends the night up chatting with all of the other people and scribbling in her journal. And then at about 3 in the morning, and here I am, I'm sleeping, dead asleep at this point, she climbs up to the roof of the retreat center and jumps off to her death, going head first into the ground. And here I am as this, I think I'm about 27 years old at that time. I'm in charge of a bunch of these students, and I go outside, and here's her corpse right on the ground in front of me, and it's the most horrible thing that can happen to a teacher, and the burning question here is, why did this occur? How could this happen? So I was in charge of the repatriating her body to America. I was dealing with the police. I was the only person who spoke Hindi, so I had to sort of deal with all that stuff. And the last words in her journal were essentially, "I am a Bodhisattva." And for those of you who don't know what that means, a Bodhisattva is essentially a Tibetan angel, something that is. It's actually a very long description to describe what a Bodhisattva is, but essentially it's a deity. And it's what you try to become through meditation. And she had come to this realization that she had essentially achieved superpowers. And this is one of the things that can happen in meditation, right? You can, if you're sitting there on your pillow and the world starts changing around you, the walls will move, the time will speed up and slow down, and you can feel like you're doing really great things. This is a very normal thing that happens in meditation. And for some people, there is this attachment to these sensations and to these ideas of enlightenment that is so great that you think you can achieve it, that it becomes sort of an end state. And so the way I think about what happened to her is that she decided to keep those realizations she had and end her life at that moment so she didn't have to continue living life, right? I mean, suicide can sometimes be about holding a place in time. So this event is, at 27 years old, this is me sort of, I'm just sort of becoming an adult in many ways in the world. And the first thing that I do is I have to bring her body back to Delhi, and from Delhi back to the United States. And this is really the instigating moment that ties together every book that I've written. And you can see there's a bunch of these books right here. And the first book was me dealing with the reality of a dead body, essentially. It was the reality that we can be a live person right here, and we have this spark of animation in us. And then in another moment, we no longer have that animation, but there's that flesh that still lives, that's still around, it has a social life of all its own. And I observed during the autopsy and the time that happened afterwards, people were literally fighting over her body parts. Pathology labs, insurance companies, the embassy, parents, me, all of them had a stake in her body. And to see someone go from this animated, wonderful, together person into something which is which is inert, was profound. And this, in sort of a circuitous way, this led me to writing this book, because I lived in India after this. I actually quit teaching abroad programs after that. I wasn't cut out for it. And I moved to the southern Indian city of Chennai, and I was an investigator. I started just writing for Wired and for NPR and places like that. And the village right next door to me, 80 women sold their kidneys. And I was like, oh my God, this is just insane. So I started realizing that this is the commercialization of human tissue. And this led me on a very long sort of investigative path where I wanted to understand the body as we enter into commercial markets. And so I started off on a very grim note. Sorry, it gets better from here, sort of. But that sort of established me as a serious journalist too. But and you know, so I'm spending 6 years going through criminal markets, going around the world, looking at the buying and selling of body parts. A lot of fun stuff there. And after I'd sort of processed that, and you know, done this book and learned far more about organ trafficking than probably anyone needs to, yeah, I came back to that question that Emily wrote in her journal, which was, you know, I am a Bodhisattva. Why did she think that? What was this drive? And this led me to my sort of another sort of long period of time where I was trying to understand this connection between the search for divinity and enlightenment, which is, I think we can all agree, is a noble thing to go after, and how that can become such a negative output in some cases. And I discovered, you know, lots of false gurus and shamans and spiritual practices that are trying to milk you for your money. But we also have this desire, especially, I think, in the United States, where we want superpowers to some degree. We want to, and I think it links with this idea of the American dream, which is in America, we believe if you work hard and you go for it, you can achieve greatness. And when you link that onto spirituality, and especially a technique like meditation, where the world sort of alters around you, you can feel like you're getting superpowers, and you just work hard. And Tibetan Buddhism really makes you work hard. You have to do like 1 million prostrations to get to the next level of Tibetan Buddhism, and you sort of advance in through it. If you work really hard, then you can achieve this sort of these next states. And the yogic traditions can be interpreted. If you look at the very ancient texts, like the Yoga Sutras, there's whole sections about superpowers, about turning invisible and reading people's minds and teleporting. And these are in the ancient texts. And so as Americans, when you read these, you're like, oh, look, I can go do that. But in some ways, that's misinterpreting these texts, because if we looked at Christianity, for instance, and said it's all about duplicating fish and walking on water, then you've sort of fundamentally missed some of the major teachings in Christianity, right? And so I see this sort of like, oftentimes there's this translation gap between the cultures. And then that you can both take advantage of yourself by getting attached to that idea, or someone can take advantage of you. And that led me down to this, this book, The Death and Time Mountain, which I later renamed The Enlightenment Trap because it's a better title. And so that's the short history of my career up until about 2011 or so. And then what happened? I was making this career of mine, sort of being a hard-hitting investigative journalist and being very, very suspicious of anyone who is saying that you can get superpowers, right? I think you can understand how I get here. And then I see this photo of a dude sitting on an iceberg in somewhere north of the Arctic Circle. He looks a lot like this. It's actually not a photo of him, but he looks a lot like this. And he's making a statement saying that he can teach anyone to control their body temperature at will, to control their immune system consciously, and do all sorts of crazy feats. His name is Wim Hof, and I think he's bullshit. I think that he's another guy out there trying to take advantage of people with this offer of superpowers, and at this point, Wim Hof is not well known. And I'm like, I'm going to go get out in front of this and prove him that he's wrong. And also I want to note that I was a little pissed at Wim Hof, even just looking at him, because I was in my, at this point, early 30s, and I'm thinking to myself, there's a natural course of human life, right? We were born, we grow up, we're sort of fit for a little while, and then there's this sort of slow decline into sort of getting fatter and getting more unhealthy, right? This is the narrative that we all No. and it's one that we reinforce, and there's some truth to it, but you know, my waistline, as it was sort of creeping over my belt, was pissed at Wim Hof because he was saying that's not the course of events, not the way they have to happen. And so I flew out to Poland with a commission that eventually ran in Playboy magazine. I have been shirtless in Playboy. This is true. Where I got there and you know, I get off the plane and you know, Wim Hof is a Dutch guy, right? And he held a bunch of world records for submerging himself in ice, running barefoot marathons in north of the Arctic Circles, doing a marathon in the, I believe it was the Sahara Desert, also barefoot with no water. He'd obviously done some pretty crazy feats. We know this about him. But you know, I get off this plane in Poland, and the first thing I see is not an impressive character. He's this sort of shortish dude with really crazy unkempt hair, teeth all over the place, smells bad. He's wearing a green pointy cap that makes him look like a garden gnome. And I'm pretty sure he's homeless. And I'm like, this is not going to be hard to debunk this fellow. Why did I bother? And you know, he takes me in this van, and we drive off into the hinterlands. And this is, I believe it's somewhere in January, first, second, third week in January. And so winter in Poland, right? This is the winter that stopped the Nazi army, stopped Napoleon's army. Cold, yeah. And we get into the mountains, and you know, I'm with two other guys because Wim Hof is not well known at this point. Only two guys other than me showed up, wanting to learn these methods. He drops me off at his dilapidated farmhouse, I guess you could call it, you know, high up in the mountains, and you know, there's snow everywhere, and he says, okay, you know, just put your bags upstairs or something. He goes off to do whatever Wim does when I can't see him, and and I go upstairs and I look out the back window, and there's this dude sitting there in black underwear, throwing snow on his chest, and steam is coming off of him. This happened. And I'm looking out there and I'm like, what is going on? How is this happening? And also, there's no way I'm doing that. And one of the two guys who was there, the guy's name was Janis Kuza. He was a Latvian like MMA fighter guy, amazing individual. He was like, yeah, I'm going out right now. And he goes out and stands out in the snow with them. I'm like, forget this. And so as a writer, I sort of have this choice, right? I can just sort of sit back and write from a distance and watch things happen, and that's sort of an objective way to do things, right? Or you can jump in and try something. And I'm really trying not to jump in. But I have a conversation with Wim that night. It's actually over a game of chess, and I trounce him in chess. It's great. But you know, there's something about the conversation that we had where I'm like, this guy is very earnest, right? He's someone who really believes himself for all his obvious failings, and there's a lot of them. He speaks disorganized. He starts spouting out things like, we're going to win the war on bacteria, and they're going to give me a Nobel Prize, and like, I don't know what the hell this is all about. Huge ego in some ways, but other than that ego, there's also this like earnestness. He really, really believes it, and I figure, all right, I can just see this genuine thing, and I say, all right, I'm going to try it. I'm going to do this stuff with you, and I'm still going to debunk you, but I'm going to give you a shot. The next day, we wake up early in the morning, and it's, you know, it's bitterly cold because he hasn't figured out how to turn on his coal-fired furnace in the house, and he the first thing he does is teaches me this breathing method, and when I say teach, I'm using that term very lightly. Wim is a terrible teacher of his own method. I sort of have to extract from him what he's talking about. And he essentially what it is a hyperventilation method. If you're into yoga, it's something like pranayama. It's something like the Kundalini rising methods. And I'll do a little bit for you. It looks like this. can't do it for too long because I'm going to get dizzy. And you do get dizzy doing this. And then you do about 30 breaths. And then you exhale all the air out of your lungs. And you just hold your breath. And that's it. That's the basic introductory method. Breathe, hold your breath with no air in your lungs. And you find the first time I could do it, I could hold my breath for like, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds. And the second time I did that, you know, you're doing one after another. Another second repetition, I'm holding my breath for like a minute with no air in my lungs. And the third one, it's like almost 2 minutes with no air in my lungs. I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool. You know, something's happening. I don't know what it is. I'm feeling tingly. If you do it long enough, your hands go like this. That's sort of weird. T-Rex arms, they call it. And then he says, okay, you've done this breathing. Okay, I want you to do another round. So I'm still sort of dizzy with all the sort of endorphins and things that go along with breathing a lot. He says, now just start doing push-ups after, you know, and no air in your lungs. Just do push-ups. And I'm like, all right, that's weird. I knew that I could do about 20 push-ups. Again, this is the belly thing going on, you know. Not an impressive specimen of physical health, but I could do 20 push-ups. And I do the breathing. And I exhale all the air from my lungs, and I do push-ups, and I did 40. So I doubled the amount that I'd been able to do. And I was like, whoa, just with breathing, I changed some way that my muscles worked. And so maybe Wim does know something. It sort of opened my eyes that he has something. I don't know what it is, but it's got something cool. And from then on, I was like, I'm all in. I'm just going to go try this. Which was good I had that impression, because when he told me to go out into the snow in my underwear about 20 minutes later, oh, man, it hurt. It hurt really badly. He says, you know, stand out here for 5 minutes. And, you know, we did this, it's a horse stance. It looks like a little phone. Okay. You know, you sort of sit like this, and you're just in the snow. And you know, I've never put my feet in the snow before. Who would put their feet in the snow? But I did, and it was horrible, as horrible as it sounds. It was like burning pain in my feet going all the way to my head, and I was like, this is crazy. And then he's like, okay, after 5, actually he made us sit there for 6, he says, go into the sauna, and that hurt worse. Right? Because what happens, the natural human physiology in those sorts of environments is something called vasoconstriction and vasodilation. Vasoconstriction, you have 60,000 miles of tubing in your body, and and all of the arteries have muscles in them. I had never used those muscles in them because there's no way to consciously activate the muscles in your arterial system. So the only thing that was activating them was actually the snow. And so they had constricted hard, and that was really, really painful. And then going into the sauna, the heat dilated those arteries, and that hurt too. Actually, it hurt worse because then you had cold. You had warm blood going through this cold tissue. So that sucked. Do the method. All right, bye. See you guys. And then Wim was like, okay, good. That's what the first day is like. You know, that's it. That's your rite of passage. That's what you do. Tomorrow will be better. And he was right. Because the next day, we're doing the same thing, same breathing protocol, same snow standing. And I last 10 minutes before that same burning, horrible, evil pain comes in. But 10, that's doubling, right? Doubling is cool. Nazi winter, remember, Nazi winter and doubling. The next day was 30 minutes. And at the end of and then we also did some stupid things like jumping into, maybe you saw that there was a photo of like me meditating on ice with this like river. Did you see it? It was really quick. Yeah, I did that too. And the snow melted around me as I did. And then we dunked in this cold water. And by the end of the week, I was at a place where I could stand. I was warm in the snow for an hour in my skivvies. And then we hiked up a mountain in Poland in our skivvies. I had shoes on them. But still not much. It was 8 hours on the mountain. It was 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And I was sweating the whole way up. And I was like, okay, Wim Hof, he's a madman, but he's also a prophet. And there's something here that I got to know. But remember the madman part, super important. Still mad. Still mad. And so what is going on? Is this magic, right? Did he tap into my Kundalini rising and, I don't know, prana, yoga, I don't know, I'm just gonna throw words out at you. Or was there something else going on? And what I think you know, we could go deep and spiritual here, but I don't think you need to. I think that we can just look at this from sort of an evolutionary standpoint. Is that our ancestors, you know, we've been around for about, let's see, in the book I said 200,000 years. It's actually now 300,000 years. We just moved back the date recently, which is bad because my original edition said 300,000 years was a typo. So I was right the first time. But our species has been around for about 300,000 years, and in that time, our you know, monkey body, our great ape body, had to deal with constant changes in the environment, whether you're in excessive heat in the deserts in Africa, or you know, as we eventually trekked out of those regions across the Alps and the Himalayas into the New World, the constant for us was always environmental change. It was always that, you know, even if we're just talking sub-Saharan Africa, which we spent most of our time in that region, at night the temperature can go down to 50, 40, right? And it'll go up to like 120. So our body has to like flex and breathe in this. And we had technology, right? We had fire, we had ladles and spears and all sorts of stuff like that. But we didn't have North Face and battery powered jackets and central heating, right? There's a big change in that, and it was our bodies that their adaptability was fundamental. And in fact, it's that same adaptability that every life form on the planet for the last 3 billion years has had to deal with. We have to deal with our environment, and they deal with it in all sorts of different ways. But what has happened in our lifetime and our parents' lifetime, and maybe to some degree our great-grandparents' lifetime too, is our technological prowess has gotten so advanced that we live in a perpetual state of stasis, homeostasis, this thing where the environment is sort of factored out, right? You know, we have electrical lighting that keeps us in essentially an eternal summer, right? When the days are long. You know, the sun goes down in January, and we're like, oh, flip on the lights, right? That's not natural. Same thing with cold. You know, when we have these seasonal fluctuations, we flip on the heater, flip on I have a sweater on right now, right? Most of you guys are in fleeces. It's the first cold day in Colorado. And you know, we have essentially just gotten lazy because we have this pleasure drive. We have this idea that we want comfort, and that's a very natural thing to want, and it's a biological necessity, but it's now just so easily accessed that we're totally taken out of nature. And there's this, it doesn't have to be that way, right? What happened, what the Wim Hof method showed me is that you can actually sort of get some of that back. You can, and all you need to do is expose yourself to nature. You expose your skin to nature. You need those neural impulses coming into your body. And I'll get a little bit into that later on how to do this. But I also want to note, one of my favorite stories about America is one of our founding myths, Thanksgiving. When in 1621 we had these guys with really funny hats and collars come over from England and show up in essentially Cape Cod in the middle of the winter, the Pilgrims, and they were really not well prepared for North America at that time, and they were also total weirdos, and no one wanted to talk to them in North America. They're like, no, we're not going to touch you guys. And so they built their little village in Plymouth, and they shivered through this winter until, what was it? It was in March, cold. I grew up in Rhode Island, so you know the winters are no joke there. Wet and just sort of nasty and drab. And so the Pilgrims are looking out and looking over like a stone wall that built up, and then this one dude walks up to them in the middle, and his name is Samoset, and he is wearing only a loincloth. You can Google Samoset, S-A-M-O-S-E-T, and you can look at like one of these, the first Google image is of this guy just walking up there. He's in a loincloth. He's like, welcome, Englishmen. He speaks English. It's true, also. He learned it from fishermen. He says, welcome, Englishmen. And the next thing he says, "Do you have any beer?" Which is which is unfortunate because the pilgrims didn't have any beer, right? And instead they offered him a coat. They gave him, they were like, "Oh, you look so cold, here's a coat." But what was it about the Algonquin of that time that allowed them to be so resilient to the environment? Like, why is it that the pilgrims, our cultural ancestors, why were they so like, "No, this is so horrible"? And he was like, "This is great, man. Got any beer, right?" It was because the Algonquin took their children from a young age, babies, infants, and put them in the snow for 15 minutes every day during the winter, which sounds like a bad parenting tip. But what it did is that, and sort of their general lifestyle, put them in harmony to some degree with the elements. Their bodies, at the very young age, said, "Okay, in our life, we're going to have to deal with some of this frigid cold weather sometimes. And it is going to invest resources into its aging process to keep you warm in the winter." And this is exactly what happened. And you'll notice that even today, if you find, and they're very rare, like indigenous groups that are sort of really don't have a lot of technology, you'll find them being very resilient to the cold. You'll also find some homeless populations being very resilient to the cold for different reasons. And it's because our bodies evolutionarily have to adapt quickly. It's not like there's a snowstorm coming or a blizzard coming and you're like, "Well, I'll get ready for that later." Like, no, you have to get ready for it now. And those genes, which were passed down from our ancestors, we got the ones who won, right? We got the right genes. We didn't get the genes from the guys who were like, "Yeah, no, forget that." They passed on. And there's a lot of underlying mechanisms for how that works, and I go into this in the book. I talk about something called brown adipose tissue. I talk about a lot of just underlying metabolic mechanisms for that, why this works. And don't trust me, read the book, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But I will say one thing is that a lot of us in America struggle with our weight, right? We're always worried about our weight, and one of the theories that's going on right now is that white fat that we have around our midsections that we cultivate there and keep it like a little prized possession, and we find that it's really hard to burn off with exercise. You can do it with exercise, but that's not why that is there. What actually happens is that the body is storing that for the environmental challenge. It's storing that as fuel to suck away and burn. And this is what brown adipose tissue does. This is brown fat, I'm using those interchangeably, I should just choose one, is a stove, and its fuel is the white fat. And it will literally suck it up and burn it passively for you to get, it's not for you to get thinner, it's for you to survive the winter. And so this is just sort of one of those evolutionary processes that happen. So, I have half an hour left. So essentially what I'm saying here is that Wim Hof didn't have superpowers. What he had was human powers, and they're things that we all can cultivate and grab for ourselves and accentuate. And you can really do it at any age. It's really great if you're an infant because that you're super plastic at that point, which means your body is getting ready for a long life. But even as an adult, as I proved, as I showed, that you can still grab these benefits from putting yourself in the environment. And so we often think about fitness and health along two general pillars in America, right? We talk about nutrition, the stuff you eat, and exercise. And if you just had the right balance of that sort of energy, consumption and energy expenditure, you're going to be healthy, right? This is a very dumbed down way of thinking about what we have. But what I'm suggesting in this book is that there is a third pillar that we are ignoring, which is our connection to the environment. That we need, that we have to look at that right now, all of you guys are burning calories passively. Just being alive burns calories. Being alive, you know, you have to continue doing stuff. So you're not challenging your body at all. And having a little bit of discomfort is really not a bad thing. Having a little bit of discomfort keeps that edge on, keeps you saying, okay, we're gonna do this a little bit more. And versus like total comfort is like sort of stasis. It's sort of like, oh, just relaxing into it. And we are all guilty of this. Like, there's no one I know who's like, I'm always a little uncomfortable, man, it's great. You know, like, no, we always want to go back into our warm little house, and there's nothing wrong with that, but being attentive to that is useful, and it's important. It's a tool that you can keep in your toolbox. There also happen to be immune benefits to this, which is super great. You know, one of those things that indigenous communities, especially in our what do you call it, archaeological record, right? What we see they didn't live an incredibly long period of time if you factor in child mortality. But if you factor that out, you don't look for child skeletons, and you look for sort of just adult skeletons. Actually, a lot of indigenous communities live pretty long, or 10,000 years ago, we were living pretty decent lives. You can get into your 80s, you can find skeletons into their 90s. But interestingly enough, what you also find is they have excellent teeth, and they have almost no, what do you call it, arthritis. And arthritis, and we can't see much more than that because obviously you decay, right? So we can't tell what their soft tissues were like. But it does look like our ancestral populations did not have a lot of autoimmune diseases. And arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, is essentially your body looking at your joints and saying that's a foreign invader. That's a thing that I want to go protect the body from. So our immune system is very, very complex. And I can't go into every little detail about it, but essentially what it is a predator that runs around your body looking for the bad guys that are coming in. That's a medical explanation for predator, bad guys. You get a bacteria, it sends out the macrophages, the neutrophils, the various cell good guys to go and get that out of there. Cells, you have an adaptive and an innate immune system. The innate is you're raising your fever if you get cold, and the adaptive is sort of it got the virus and it learned about the virus and then it knows how to kill the virus next time. But we live again in this world that is static. We got great medicine, which is good. There's nothing wrong with great medicine. We have no real predators we have to deal with on a daily basis. We have generally sterile area. And we also don't trigger our fight or flight responses naturally very often. When was the last time you saw a Bengal tiger not in a cage? Yeah, never, right? I hope. Or that'd be really cool, actually. But and so the immune system is modulated by a bunch of different factors, but it's also connected to your fight or flight response, and it's connected to your parasympathetic responses. And because we never activate it, sometimes that predator, that wolf that's running around your body, gets bored. This is also totally medical, right? It gets bored and it says, okay, I'm going to go chomp on the joints, because what predators want to chew on bones? Oh my God. What am I talking about? So here's the interesting thing. When you see people doing these ice baths that I'm going to talk about and these breathing methods, you'll see a lot of cases of spontaneous remission of autoimmune illnesses. You'll see arthritis reverse. You will see Crohn's disease reverse. I've seen people use it to treat Parkinson's, which is not reverse Parkinson's, but like maintain a level with Parkinson's where they don't have to like keep on adding more and more drugs. And it's because they're trying to put their body into they're dealing with their body not as just an input device for drugs and interventions, but they're trying to relate to their environment. I know that sounds like woo-woo bullshit, but we also have real science behind this. What in 2011? Yeah, right after I went to train with Wim, these doctors in the Netherlands met with Wim, and Wim made this claim that he can consciously suppress his immune system. And they were like, bullshit, because that's not possible, according to medical science. And he said, no, really, I can do it. I'm going to win the war on bacteria too. And he's like, oh, man, Wim. What they did is the doctors they talked to were the people who test immunosuppressant drugs. So if you're going to get a kidney is a foreign object. You put it in your body. If you don't suppress your immune system, that predator eats that kidney. So you need to develop drugs that suppress your immune system so that predator is like dead asleep and doesn't eat the kidney. So these guys designed a test, which was where they inject you with endotoxin, which is essentially E. coli bacteria that has been killed. And when you inject it into somebody, it doesn't hurt you, but the body, looks at the cell walls and say, "Oh my God, we've got an invader." All hands on deck, and it activates that the innate immune system, which is your fever response, your runny nose. You're going to feel like you're pretty ill, and so what should happen 99% of the time is you're going to get that fever response on this. And what actually happened is they injected Wim with this endotoxin, and he showed no response other than a minor headache, is all he reported. They measured all of his blood levels, cortisol, cytokines, all that stuff. You can look it up in the book. Essentially, he turned off his immune system, and they were like blown away. And then they were like, well, maybe he's just a freak. And yeah, he is a freak. So I get that. So then what they did is they grabbed 20 college students from Radboud University in Holland, and they did the same thing to all of them. They put them through Wim's training program, the same one that I did, which was just like standing in the snow for an ungodly amount of time and climbing up a mountain and doing the breathing. And after 1 week, they repeated the same results, which means that they were able to suppress their immune systems, which means they were able to keep that predator under control with environmental responses. And this has been groundbreaking. And this is why these books mean anything, right? This is not just total out there. Like, Wim is putting his body into scientific analysis over and over again, and we're finding that hey, it's important to work with the environment. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to start doing this. And this is just the intro level to it. And they say that there's a Wim Hof method. There is not a Wim Hof method. There is a Wim Hof set of principles. And I encourage you to learn this breathing method. Look on YouTube, like it's all over the place. There's also online courses through the Wim Hof stuff, but you don't really need that. What it is you're trying to get real dizzy, right? and you'll feel these tingling in your arms, and then you're holding your breath with no air in your lungs. And the reason you're doing this is you're trying to get to that point where your body's like, I have to breathe. I got to do it. I want to breathe right now. And you're trying to, it's the gasp point. And you're trying to intercede with your mind to move that gas point temporarily a little bit further along. Just to say, my mind has a little bit more control over my body. And you can do it in two ways. You can do it, you can grin and bear it. I'm going to hold my breath a little long, you'll turn purple. It's great. And then you can do it another way. You can relax into it. I suggest the relaxation route. And that's what you're training. You're just training that thing. And this is what I call the wedge in the book. This is you're putting a wedge between your body and your mind. And the more you can strengthen that, the better. And breathing is one of the best ways because it's under your conscious control. We take a breath right now, and you can do it, right? Forget about breathing, and you're still doing it. It's great. Breathing's awesome. And it's one of these things where you can just sort of slip in and out of it. So once you get better at breathing, you can get better at other parts of your body. And so now let's talk about the horrible part. Cold. It's going to suck. We're all weak. We're all, we love our warm everything because comfort is great. But it's also hurting us. And so what you're going to do is get uncomfortable. And the intro level is jump in your shower, start off warm, clean yourself off. That's great. And at the end of the shower, do the hardest thing any human has ever done in the history of the planet. And turn that knob all the way cold. Not off, cold. Like mine goes all the way, and it's off. Like, oh, no. Cold. You can do it. I believe in you. And then sitting there, and this is critical. This is where this wedge idea comes in. Don't curse the day you were born and say Scott Carney's a horrible person. Those women, this is all bullshit. And don't be like, I can do it. Relax. And your goal here is to, instead of engaging your fight or flight responses, which is the contraction of your muscles to warm your body, you're going to say, I'm going to relax, and I'm going to let my body heat itself using a passive process. And this is the whole sucking white fat from your system and burning it for heat energy thing. I wish I could tell you that cold showers are going to make you lose a lot of weight. It's not. They're not in and of themselves going to do that. But what you're doing is training your body to be able to relax in a stressful environment. And this is hugely useful if you have autoimmune stuff, because this is that thing. And so if you just do these two things, it's about 15 minutes a day, and I outline that in my book, but you can also find that stuff everywhere. You will see dramatic changes over time. You'll see the most changes over the first month you do it, and then sort of there's the law of diminishing returns, because that's unfortunately the way the life works. And then you can seek out other ways to find environmental stimulus. And here's the beauty: Wim Hof method is not a method. You can go out and look for other ways to engage in the environment. You can do this with heat to some degree, although heat can be dangerous. If you overheat, it's hard to come down. Cold is easier because it's easier to warm yourself up. But you can go for swimming in Boulder Creek. Is there a creek that comes through Longmont? There probably is. Right? Great. So yeah, you go swimming in left hand, right? And sitting there, and it's going to be cold, and you're going to relax, and you're going to get out, and you might have this after drop, which is like a really cold sensation after you get out. But don't act irresponsibly. Go into these waters, and your goal is to try to feel okay and try to feel relaxed. And one thing that I found, which is something that I'm writing about in the next book, I don't really touch on it in this book, is you can start to realize that these stimuli coming into your body aren't the worst thing in the world. You can start to think of those stimuli as, instead of pain and horror or whatever, right, and stress, you can think of them as joy. And you really can do this. You can say, that cold is joyful. And you can think about fires in your belly. And I know it sounds woo and crazy, but the mind is crazy, so it's not my fault. It works. And I ran this race in England. It's the coldest obstacle course race supposedly in the world, called the Tough Guy. They do it the coldest day in England every year. I think it's the third week of January, historically the coldest. I ran it in my skivvies. Other people were in neoprene, and they were cold and shivering at the end of it, and I had a smile on my face that entire race. I'm not a terrible runner, I didn't win or anything, but I was warm. And what I was doing on that race is I was saying, I was feeling that cold on my skin and saying, that cold is pleasurable, that cold is joy. And it worked. It worked. I tricked myself into doing that, and then that trick turned out to be heat. And then where other people were shivering at the end of the race and being like, really horrible, here I am, the naked dude, was like, this is great. So that's I have 10 minutes left, so I'd rather just yammer. I'd like to know what you guys want to know from me. You, in the back.
So have they done any, or has, what was his name? Your
Wim
Dutch?
Hof?
Wim Hof. Were there any studies on type 1 diabetes? An autoimmune disease. Yeah.
Type 1 is that childhood diabetes?
It's generally thought of that way, but there are more cases now coming up where people are being diagnosed into their late 30s, which is very odd, because the islets on the pancreas, they don't know what causes the islets to initially start to fail.
Right.
Then that triggers the autoimmune response to kick on and kill all the islets, and then they go into diabetic ketoacidosis and they don't have any insulin.
That's amazing.
So it's like, I always wondered, like, wow, if you're talking autoimmune, that they tell
so
us
type
that
2
it's autoimmune.
diabetes, they have definitely shown
Yeah.
that this works. But type 2 is different. Type 1, I do not know specific studies on this. I think the principles you're talking about seem plausible to me. But this is going to be the problem with everything a la Wim Hof, or really anything in this sort of like more holistic stuff, is that A, there's not much money in doing these studies on these things, and 2, science takes forever to do it. And because these concepts are really about a broad range, it's a broad range of health principles, putting your body sort of in sort of a state which is beneficial. Like, then to look at every micro intervention is just a very expensive and time-consuming affair that very few pharmaceutical companies, actually no, 0 pharmaceutical companies are willing to get behind. So the research that's going on is really only in academic laboratories, and it's happening at Stanford, it's happening at Wayne State. Is that in Michigan? Is that Wayne State? Yeah. Wayne State, it's happening up in Radboud, it's happening in Germany, it's happening all over the world, but it's only like, one professor with his, $1 million department, which is great, but, not billion-dollar pharmaceutical stuff. So a lot of with these science questions, I can say a lot of stuff is promising, but we don't know because we're not investing in it. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the benefits of the breathing exercises?
Mm-hmm.
Is that seem to be getting used to low oxygen, or what is that?
Sure. So there's a lot of breath work in the world, right? And there's and because the breathing, when the Buddha taught meditation, he said you start with breath, right? And we've been looking at the breath for a long time, and it can put you in a lot of different states. It can do heat. It can put you in a psychedelic state. You could, if you want to do the Wim Hof method, you could trip if you want to. And there's all sorts of things that are crazy about breathing. So I will just talk about this one method, which is the controlled hyperventilation. What you're doing is you're blowing off CO2, essentially. So your body detects when you have to breathe, when you feel like you've been holding your breath and you have to gasp in. It's actually not a reflex to gasp. It's a reflex to exhale, and because the body, for whatever evolutionary reason, does not detect oxygen levels in the body. What it does is it detects the rise of the poisonous byproduct, the acidic byproduct of respiration, which is CO2 in the body. So when you blow off all the CO2 with the hyperventilation, you've lowered your CO2 rates to a really, really low level. And so it takes longer to build it up, which is one of the reasons why you're able to hold your breath longer. But by doing that trick, you're able to also convince your mind, or whatever that thing that's governing the breathing, you're able to convince it that your mind knows better. So you're actually shifting the whole system over, because it's not designed to be hacked with. It was sort of a more passive thing. So one of the reasons why you can do more push-ups is because you've blown off all that CO2 and your body just doesn't know it's tired yet. But isn't that interesting? Your body wasn't tired. It was the governor in your mind saying you were tired in the first place, because you still had the ability to do it. You didn't die at the end of it. So there's something. The body is generally conservative. The body generally wants to stop way earlier than it needs to. So this is just one intervention to sort of break in to that extra potential that is just latent in us. Yes?
So if a person's on immune-suppressing drugs for a condition,
Mm-hmm.
Would this be dangerous to enter into?
The only way I can answer that is talk to your medical practitioner, right?
You know what they're going to say.
Yeah, buy something really expensive, right? Is that what they're going to say? I don't think if you get a kidney transplant, you should do the Wim Hof method in cold showers to keep that at bay.
That's where I am.
But I don't know. The weird thing is the human body wasn't designed to get foreign kidneys in it, right? So we've made ourselves into a Franken-human to some degree, and so the immune system's doing the right thing. Like, if you were a caveman and an extra kidney showed up in you, that's alarm bells, right? So I don't know how evolutionarily that works. So I can say that it has an immunosuppressive effect. Will it stop a kidney transplant? I don't know, but maybe. I mean, you know, if you have a kidney transplant, I mean, you can try it. If your kidney fails, I want to know.
Right about it.
Yes.
Okay, 2 questions. So you're going up this mountain in your skivvies, I'm assuming you're barefoot.
No, I have shoes on.
Okay, so your extremities, are they going to get frostbite? And then the other thing is, what's on your arm?
Oh, the arm story is too long. Can't answer it.
Okay.
Yeah, frostbite is a concern, and you know, don't learn the breathing method and then go hike to the Arctic Circle. Bad idea. You'll die. In the battle of human versus nature, nature always wins. So when I was hiking up those mountains, I had warm clothes in my backpack. Like I had gloves. I think I might have been wearing gloves for some of it, and I had a hat on because the extremities do cool down faster. I could certainly increase the blood flow there, but at the end of the day, you know, nature's going to win. And so one of the things I always fear is that people might do these methods and try to do something really dumb and then not have a backup plan. I always had a backup plan. Because honestly, when if you're like looking up at Long's Peak, right, and you're like, yeah, I can do this in my skivvies. It's scary, right? It's really scary. And I think a guy in England just tried this in his underwear at somewhere in Wales. Got hypothermia and had to be rescued off the mountains. Yeah, do it smart. we have all this technology. Let's use it responsibly, but also sort of give ourselves a stimulus.
So when you blow off the CO2, how does that affect your heart rate and blood pressure?
I have no idea. I believe over time, what people experience with, I thought you were talking in the moment, it should lower your blood pressure overall. But the exact effects of this, that's not something that I studied in depth personally. But yeah, I believe it. From some people I've spoken to, they say it lowers the blood pressure. But it's something you experiment with, and you see if it does anything, and then you monitor yourself carefully as you do it. The tattoo says Delhi is far away. Yes.
So you said with the law of diminishing returns that, you know, it ceases to be super challenging to swim in the Antarctica, and that you need to do something. Okay, but you need to do other things to stimulate your connection with the environment. What are those things that you are currently doing now that you are?
I'm so cool. Yeah. Right. That's right. Polar bear. You know, I would say longer durations in the water is something you can do. I've actually, for me personally, where I am, I'm at the point of the Wim Hof method where I find the breathing the most useful. I find the cold really interesting, and I use it when I can. But we're just coming out of summer, so it's like you can't really do this well in the summer. I don't want to buy ice every day, right? Some people do buy like freezers. And then like you know, standing freezers, and they fill them with water, and then it's not powerful enough to freeze it all the way. I don't know, whatever. And they unplug it before they get in, which is smart. I'm much more interested now in this concept of the wedge and what else we can do with it, and the idea of like, I'm fascinated with how I trick myself into joy from cold, and I want to see other ways that I can do similar hacks into the body to change the way I work, and you know, it's going to get real weird for me this year. I'm looking at heat. I'm looking at cold. I'm looking at breathing. I'm looking at light. I'm looking at sound as sort of stimulus that are interesting. I'm getting interested in sort of the research in psychedelics. I'm getting interested in electricity. I mean, anything that's a stimulus that's coming into you is potential for exploration. And I don't know where this is gonna end or take me, and I hope I don't die doing it. It would be great if I could actually write the book. But you know, I'm seeing that there's a lot of opportunity once you start realizing that we are actually part of the environment. That we are. I don't view myself as just me stopping at the edge of my skin. I realize that my skin is talking to this 80-degree room right now. Right? It's really warm in here. And it's talking to all of these things, and and there's sort of a communication that goes back and forth, and I want to understand that more. And this could go as sort of a weird spiritual route, and maybe that's okay, right? Because I think that we all are all connected, and that is one thing that I've learned. I got up Kilimanjaro, it was -30 outside, and I was alive. It wasn't warm. I was alive, and there's something about accepting that connection to the environment that I think is critical to that. Yes.
The immune system thing, a lot of doctors think about the immunosuppressive.
Right.
Does Wim Hof that someone takes it off and you put it back on? Does he think so something? Change it on?
It's hard to say because the idea of immunosuppressive is partially a Western. That's medical science saying immunosuppressive. He says, yeah, I can do that. What else can he do? He claims he's going to win the war on bacteria, which does not sound like immunosuppressive. That sounds like immuno-increasing. We have had no studies saying that he is an antibacterial agent yet. So I am not going to go out in front of that and be like, yeah, forget penicillin, just do this. Wim might say that, but I'm not going to go there. But I do think what it does is it gives you elasticity and resilience, right? If your normal health range is here from foreign stimulus coming in, and this is an arbitrary hand moment, right? What the Wim Hof method does is this environmental connection just gives you more capacity to deal with stuff. It doesn't mean if the stimulus, which is the meteor strike hitting you, you're still going to get wiped out by that. But it gives you just sort of more room to deal with it, and that's what I think. I think it makes your immune system more robust. I don't know if it helps acute infections. I don't know if it helps form cysts around infection sites. Who knows? Who knows? You in the back.
Yeah, I'm more curious. Where did Wim Hof? How did he discover this, or where did he get it from?
He jumped because he's a crazy Dutch guy. He was a child in the '60s. He was really interested in yoga and pranayama, traveled in India, did a lot of weird herbal drugs, not like the name brand drugs, but weird stuff. So he was always sort of a seeker and out there. And then one day, it was winter in Holland, and he was like, that canal looks awesome, I'm gonna go jump in it. He just stripped off all his clothes, and he went butt naked into the canal, and then he noticed that his body started hyperventilating. And he was like, oh, look, my body's hyperventilating. This is great. I like it. And he said he felt the sensation of extreme good. So it's sort of like that thing I'm talking about with the wedge. It's this extreme good feeling. And then what he did is he took that hyperventilation, and he remembered it, and he started practicing that outside. And I think he practiced it because he was like, this feels good. This feels good. And I think he was following this joy. Because, Wim is this just mystic in a way. He's just fluttering in the wind, and he's following his heart, which can sometimes which is the reason he found this method. It's also the reason why he's incredibly unsystematic, unreliable, and you should never follow him up the mountain like Kilimanjaro. I have one more question. You in the very corner, because you never go for the corners. Yeah.
I'm curious how it seems like there's this paradigm shift. How do you now walk around the world 24/7? Relating to this machine of your body as it ages, as the limitations and possibilities of it, but really just the possibilities of it, and so not controlling it, wanting to control it. I'm just curious how, I think you must be in culture shock in a way inside the narratives that run us.
Yeah,
and I'm curious how when you sit down to it, is this always, what's your 24/7 experience like in this body now?
Well, I am just as lazy as everyone else sometimes, right? Sometimes I'll be doing the Wim Hof method for months and months on end, and then I'll forget one day, and then I'll stop for 2 months because I forgot about it, right? So I do not want to point myself out as this paragon of human perfection and totally in tune with nature. I am struggling to be in tune with nature, and I really want to be, and I think that's the starting point. But the question is we're born into our bodies at some point, and I take this from Buddhism. We all know that we're going to die. At some point, the story that we're living ends on a minor key. It ends on a sad note, right? We know death is gonna suck. I'm sorry, we're all gonna die, and it's gonna suck, and that's the truth. So, but now once you accept that truth, what does that mean for the time that you have? And you can't be better than you are, right? You just are, and so you just have to try, and you have to try to be a good person every day, and that's what I try to do. And I'm not always a good person. I sometimes mess up, but you know, I think that there's something very deep about understanding that this limited time is all we get. And why not play, right? Why not try to be joyous? Why not, like, go out there and try to be the best you can and be in touch? And, like, you know, if you don't have a fully funded 401k at the end when you're on your pillow, that's not winning, right? Winning is not, you know, I did it, guys. Like no, winning is like going through our life realizing that it is precious, and you know, all we can give is what we can give, and you know, you can be selfish sometimes, you can be selfless sometimes, and you are the one navigating that. And so that's how I view my place in the earth, and I want to be more connected with nature. I want to see less, you know, like effortless comfort. I think that you know, there's some struggle is good, you know, and I think struggle is something fundamental in us, and I'm not always perfect at it. So that's how I do it. Yeah, so there's that. Thank you, everyone. I got books over here, a few of them.